Targaryen lore. The Prince of Prophecies. Rhaegar Targaryen. True History, Part 415. The Golden Prince and the Hidden Shadow. He was the heir everyone loved, the golden promise of a dynasty. But his choices, his secrets, set an entire realm ablaze. Do you know what truly motivated Rhaegar to abduct Lyanna Stark, and what he, the Prince of Prophecies, truly expected from this act that would plunge Westeros into bloodshed? Prepare to unravel the soul of a man who was both a hero and a catalyst for tragedy, a king who never reigned, but whose legacy echoes for millennia. Amidst the grandeur and escalating madness of House Targaryen, Rhaegar was born, the eldest, son of King Aerys II and Queen Rhaella. From his very first breath, Rhaegar was a child of remarkable beauty, with the silvery hair typical of his lineage and deep violet eyes that seemed to carry the weight of unseen worlds. He was the heir, apparent the realm's hope, the dragon everyone believed would usher in a new golden age after the gradual decline under his father's reign. His childhood was spent in the opulent corridors of the Red Keep and on the windswept lands of Dragonstone, his family's ancestral home. From an early age, Rhaegar demonstrated a keen intellect and a contemplative nature, unusual for a young prince. He was not a boy given to brutal games or pursuits of military glory like his uncle Daemon Targaryen, or even his grandfather, Aegon V. Rhaegar was a scholar by nature, a voracious reader who preferred the company of books and maesters to that of knights and courtiers. His room was a sanctuary of ancient scrolls, historical chronicles, and forgotten tomes, where he spent hours on end, seeking knowledge beyond what was openly taught. Beyond his passion for studies, Rhaegar was a talented musician. He played the harp with a mastery that moved all who heard him. His songs were melancholic and haunting, filled with a lyricism that suggested a deep sensitivity and perhaps a hidden sorrow in his soul. They say his melodies were so beautiful they could bring listeners to tears. This musical ability endeared him to the people, who saw him as a gentle and cultured prince, very different from the cruelty and unpredictability that were beginning to emerge in his father. His popularity was immense. The people loved him. The lords respected him. He was the perfect contrast to the shadow lengthening over the Iron Throne. While King Aerys II, Targaryen, the Mad King, plunged deeper and deeper into paranoia and cruelty, his mind unraveling into whispers and wildfire delusions, Rhaegar remained the figure of balance, the light many hoped would save the realm from impending darkness. Aerys, in his moments of lucidity, saw in Rhaegar the promise of a brilliant future. But as madness consumed him, he began to see his own son as a threat, a potential conspirator. This stormy relationship between father and son, the love and the fear, added a layer of complexity to Rhaegar's life, forcing him to navigate a labyrinth of duty and danger within his own home. Rhaegar's passion for books and stories was not merely academic. From a very young age, he had discovered something in the ancient tomes that haunted and fascinated him: prophecies. Not common prophecies, but Targaryen prophecies, the draconic dreams that had guided his house for centuries. He delved into the legends of Azor Ahai, the hero who wielded a sword of light, and the prince that was promised, a figure destined to save the world from a great darkness. Initially, Rhaegar believed his destiny was to be the warrior who would wield the sword, who would become the prince that was promised. He dedicated himself to the arts of war with an intensity that surprised everyone. Once a scholar, he became a skilled knight, a capable strategist. His spear was sharp, his shield strong. He participated in tourneys, and his performance was always remarkable. People saw his dedication and thought it was a desire for glory. But for Rhaegar, it was a desire to fulfill a destiny, to prepare for a threat that he, in his soul, could already feel approaching. This obsession with prophecies was a burden, not a pastime. Rhaegar felt the weight of the ancient words on his shoulders. He read about the long night, about the darkness that would come from the north, about the need for a hero to save the two realms of men. His own house's history, the flight from Valyria based on Danish dreams, Aegon's conquest driven by a vision of unity against the ice, all this reinforced his conviction. He could not ignore the whispers of the past, the warnings that seemed to come from the future. In his quest for understanding, Rhaegar did not limit himself to books alone. He conversed with maesters, with septons, and, more importantly, with those who knew the deepest secrets of his own family. He sought wisdom in every corner, trying to unravel the enigmas that tormented him. His mind was constantly working, connecting dots, seeking patterns, trying to find the truth that eluded most. This search at times made him distant, absorbed in his own thoughts, oblivious to court intrigues and his father's feasts. He had a greater purpose, and that purpose consumed him. The life of a Targaryen heir apparent was not only about studies and prophecies, it was also about duty. And Rhaegar's duty led him to marry Princess Elia Martell of Dorne. Elia was a gentle and graceful woman, though of frail health. Their marriage was a crucial political alliance, uniting the Targaryen crown with the proud and independent realm of Dorne, a realm that had resisted Aegon's conquest and maintained its autonomy for centuries. The union of Rhaegar and Elia seemed, at first, a story of happiness. They had 2 children, Princess Rhaenys and Prince Aegon. Rhaenys was a bright and spirited girl, with her Dornish mother's dark hair, but with a dragon's heart. Prince Aegon, born sometime later, was the male heir, Rhaegar's joy. There is no doubt that Rhaegar loved his wife and children. He treated them with affection and care, and his family seemed to be a point of light amidst the growing darkness of Aerys' reign. However, behind the curtains of apparent happiness, Rhaegar's melancholy persisted. The prophecy, the Song of Ice and Fire, did not leave him. He believed that the prince that was promised would need to have dragon blood, but also ice blood, or from another important lineage. He observed his children, loving them deeply, but also seeing them through the merciless lens of prophecy. The first child, Rhaenys, was not the prince. The second child, Aegon, was the prince, the heir, but Rhaegar continued to delve into his ancient texts. He read that the dragon had 3 heads, a mysterious phrase that haunted him. This led him to believe that not only one prince would be necessary for the prophecy, but perhaps 3, or that the lineage should be complemented in some way. This interpretation of the prophecy began to guide his actions in ways no one could predict, and which he, in his solitude, could not openly share. He felt a growing weight in his heart. He loved his family, but he believed that the fate of the world depended on a prophecy, on a song that needed to be sung by 3. This conviction, this search for a third, or for an essential complement, began to shape his actions in a subtle but inexorable way, leading him to a crossroads that would forever change the destiny of Westeros and his own family. He was walking a path that seemed predestined, but which was filled with danger and tragedy. Rhaegar Targaryen, the beloved prince, carried a secret. The prophecy he had deciphered in his family's ancient words propelled him to acts that seemed like madness to the outside world. His destiny, he believed, was greater than any love or family duty. The shadow of the long night, the threat of ice and fire, was as real to him as the air he breathed, and to fulfill it, he was willing to do anything. In the next chapter, we will delve into the event that would seal the fate of Rhaegar and Westeros, the tourney at Harrenhal. You will understand why the Prince of Prophecies would crown not his own wife, but a young woman from the north, with a crown of winter roses. Prepare for the whispers of a forbidden love or a predestined fate. The prophecy awakened in the desperate heart. In the tormented soul of Rhaegar Targaryen, conviction took root. This was not a path he had chosen out of simple desire or earthly ambition. It was a burden, a prophecy that compelled him to redefine his own destiny and, with it, the fate of Westeros. He believed, with a cold and haunting certainty, that he himself was the prince that was promised, or else that his purpose was to find and nurture the true incarnation of that legend. This belief was not a whim, but an obsession born of tireless dedication to ancient texts, to the whispers of dragons echoing in Dragonstone's walls, and to the lessons of his own family's history. The phrase, The dragon has 3 heads, a Targaryen maxim of mysterious origin, constantly echoed in Rhaegar's mind. He could not ignore its implication. If the dragon, symbol of his house, had 3 heads, then the prince that was promised could not be alone. A trinity would be necessary to face the darkness that would come. This interpretation led Rhaegar on a relentless search for answers in Valyria's oldest scrolls, in the Citadel's forgotten annals, and in Dragonstone's archaic records. He consulted with maesters, with septons, with anyone who could offer a new perspective. But most did not see what he saw. Most saw only legends, not an urgent call to duty. The song of ice and fire, the prophecy that Aegon I had glimpsed before the conquest, was the icy melody that dictated the rhythm of his life. Rhaegar believed that the return of the long night, the threat of the White Walkers and the eternal cold was not a mere fable to frighten children, but an imminent danger. He felt this darkness approaching, like a cold shadow over the heart of the world. This knowledge, he felt, was both a blessing and a curse. It was a solitary burden, for very few understood the true gravity of the situation. The idea that his family could be humanity's last hope uniting was an overwhelming weight. His wife, Elia Martell, was a woman he loved, but he began to see her also through the merciless lens of prophecy. Elia's frail health, a consequence of complications from Rhaenys and Aegon's births, made him question whether she would be able to bear him a 3rd child, a 3rd dragon head, which the prophecy seemed to demand. Elia's physical difficulties, her chronic pains, weighed on his soul, but the greater burden of the prophecy propelled him. He had to have a 3rd. He had to have the complement the song demanded. This perception led him down a path of despair, of searching, that would distance him from his family in pursuit of a greater destiny. While Rhaegar's soul was consumed by the search for prophecies, the realm of Westeros plunged deeper and deeper into the shadow of his father's madness, King Aerys II. The Mad King, as he would come to be known, was in a constant decline, his mind corroded by paranoia, by the fear of conspiracies, and by a growing obsession with wildfire. His mood swings were unpredictable, his acts of cruelty increasingly frequent. No one was safe in his presence. His own courtiers lived in terror. Rhaegar, as heir, watched the realm's collapse with deep anguish. He could not allow Westeros to fall into complete chaos. His vision of the long night prevented him from being a mere spectator. He knew that a divided realm, ruled by an unstable king, would have no chance against the approaching darkness. Aerys refused to listen. He saw in Rhaegar not a son, but a rival, a young man who captivated everyone and who, in his paranoia, was conspiring to steal his throne. Aerys even forbade Rhaegar from meeting with his closest friends, seeing them as conspirators. The prince tried repeatedly to reason with his father, to appeal to his sanity, to bring stability to the realm, but reason had abandoned Aerys. He saw treason in every glance, in every word. This growing instability forced Rhaegar's hand. He knew time was running out, not just for the realm, but for the prophecy. Aerys was destroying the foundation of a unified realm that Aegon I had built to face the threat Rhaegar now understood so clearly. With every pyre, every unjust execution, every delusion of his father, Rhaegar felt the urgency of the prophecy become more palpable. He needed to act, not for glory or a throne, but for the destiny of Westeros, and to find the 3rd element that would sing the song of ice and fire. War was not a choice, but a consequence of his father's madness and the urgency of his own destiny. The tourney at Harrenhal, an event of epic proportions, organized by Lord Walter Went in his vast and somber lands. It was the largest tourney Westeros had seen in decades, perhaps in a century. Rumors said that Lord Went did not have the means to finance such a spectacle, and that Prince Rhaegar himself had secretly paid for a large part of the event. If true, this would reveal a masterful move by Rhaegar to gather all the great lords of the realm in one place, far from Aerys' paranoia, to observe, to evaluate, and to seek. Beyond the luxurious banquets and spectacular jousts, Harrenhal was a stage for politics. All the big names were there, King Aerys II, in one of his rare public appearances, Queen Rhaella, Prince Rhaegar and his wife Elia Martell, Lord Tywin Lannister and his children, including young Cersei, the young Starks from the north, Rickard, Brandon, Lyanna, and Benjen, and a young and quiet Ned. Robert Baratheon, with his lion's mane and his thundering voice, was also present. The air was electrified, not just by the excitement of the games, but by the latent tension between the court's factions. Rhaegar was not just a participant in the tourney. He was a careful observer. His spear was sharp, his shield strong, and his performance in the jousts was exemplary. He was the people's favorite, the champion. But his mind was on another quest. He was there to find something, or someone, who fit his prophecies, who could be the missing link in the Song of Ice and Fire. He observed everyone, looking for a sign, a revelation. The atmosphere of the tourney was a microcosm of Westeros. On one hand, joy, music, feasting, honorable competition. On the other, whispers of conspiracy, alliances being forged in the shadows, fear of Aerys. Rhaegar moved through it all with a melancholic dignity, fulfilling his role as prince, but with his violet eyes fixed on a deeper search, seeking the final piece of a cosmic puzzle. The climax of the tourney at Harrenhal arrived, and with it, a moment that would rewrite Westeros history. Rhaegar Targaryen, the undefeated champion of the joust, the beloved prince, was ready to receive the winner's crown. Targaryen honor was at its peak, and anticipation hung in the air. Tradition dictated that the champion would crown his queen of love and beauty, and everyone expected him to place the crown of blue roses on his wife's lap, Princess Elia Martell. But Rhaegar, the Prince of Prophecies, followed another calling. He rode his horse to the side of the arena, past his wife Elia, who watched him with a smile, and rode on. The silence that fell over the tourney was so thick you could hear everyone's heart beating. The lords and ladies looked at each other, confused, shocked. And then Rhaegar stopped before an unexpected figure, Lyanna Stark, the young wolf from the north, sister of Brandon and Ned Stark, betrothed to Robert Baratheon. With a solemn gesture, Rhaegar dismounted his horse. He took the crown of blue roses, the winter flowers that symbolized the north, and gently placed it in Lyanna's lap. The act was a lightning bolt from a clear sky. The silence was broken by whispers, by gasps of shock. Robert Baratheon, whose eyes burned with fury, felt his heart chill. Elia Martell, Rhaegar's wife, maintained her composure, but her humiliation was visible in her eyes. Brandon Stark, the wild wolf, gnashed his teeth. Why Lyanna? To the world, it was an act of forbidden love, a public slight to Elia, and an affront to the Starks and Baratheons. But in Rhaegar's mind, it was the fulfillment of a prophecy. He had read in ancient books that the prince that was promised would come from the lineage of the dragon and the lineage of the wolf. Lyanna Stark, wild, spirited, with the strength of ice and the blood of the first men, was the missing piece in his prophetic puzzle. He saw in her not just a beautiful woman. He saw the destiny of Westeros, the mother of the third dragonhead, who would sing the Song of Ice and Fire. Rhaegar believed that Lyanna possessed the essence of ice that was missing in his children from Elia, who represented fire. He saw in her the destined partner to bear the Savior, the one who would bring balance to the Song of Ice and Fire prophecy. His mind was so consumed by this quest that he ignored the political implications, the personal offenses, the cataclysm he was about to unleash. He was serene, almost detached, convinced that he was following a path preordained by the gods. The act of crowning Lyanna Stark at Harrenhal was the true point of no return for Rhaegar and for the realm. That single blue rose placed in her lap was the seed of a war, a storm that would consume Westeros. What the world interpreted as an impetuous act of love or desire was, for Rhaegar, an act of desperation and blind devotion to a prophecy he believed to be humanity's only hope of salvation. And from that moment on, the realm would never be the same. The shadow of rebellion, already lurking, gained form and urgency. The blue rose thrown at Harrenhal was the spark. What followed was a series of catastrophic events that would plunge Westeros into one of its bloodiest wars. Rhaegar's obsession, his prophetic interpretations, and his seemingly impulsive actions led to a current of fury and vengeance that not even dragons could contain. In the next chapter, we will delve into the events that followed the tourney at Harrenhal, the supposed abduction of Lyanna Stark, the fury of Brandon and Rickard Stark, and how Rhaegar's quest for ultimate destiny transformed into the catalyst for Robert's rebellion. Prepare for the whispers of blood and fire, and for the story of a prince who lit the pyre of his own realm. The abduction, the revolt, and the storm. The tourney at Harrenhal had ended, but its consequences were only beginning to reverberate through Westeros like an earthquake. The blue rose, placed in Lyanna Stark's lap, was the spark that ignited a forest already parched by a king's madness and powerful men's ambitions. Rhaegar Targaryen, the champion of the joust, had made his choice, a choice that, for him, was dictated by an ancient prophecy, not by a simple whim of the heart. The world saw a forbidden love. Rhaegar saw the destiny of the world. The event that followed the tourney at Harrenhal was the catalyst for Robert's rebellion, an act that would forever be known as the abduction of Lyanna Stark. For most of Westeros, this was a simple story of an arrogant Targaryen prince who stole another man's betrothed, an insult that could not be washed away but with blood. The official narrative is cold and direct. Rhaegar Targaryen abducted Lyanna Stark and held her captive at the Tower of Joy, a remote place in Dorne. But in Rhaegar's mind, and in the complexity of events, the truth was far more nuanced, far more tragic, and, in his perception, divinely ordained. For Rhaegar, the act of taking Lyanna was not an abduction in the conventional sense. He believed it was a necessary step for the fulfillment of the Song of Ice and Fire prophecy. Lyanna Stark, the Wolf of the North, possessed the ice blood that was missing in his fire lineage. She was destined to bear the third dragon head, the final piece for the world's salvation against the Long Night. He saw in her not just a woman, but an instrument of destiny, an essential part of the great song he was desperately trying to sing. There is no indication that Rhaegar used force against Lyanna. Many speculate that she went willingly, perhaps feeling an attraction or a connection to Rhaegar's prophetic melancholy. The Tower of Joy, a secluded and beautiful place in Dorne, with its 3 pink stone towers, was the sanctuary chosen by Rhaegar for Lyanna. It was not a prison, but a place of isolation and protection where the promised child could be born safely. The fact that Rhaegar left the Tower of Joy garrisoned by 3 of the most renowned knights of the Kingsguard himself, Sir Arthur Dayne, the Sword of the Morning, Sir Oswell Went, and the Lord Commander Gerald Hightower, is a testament to the importance of his secret mission. These men, the most honorable in the realm, would not be there for a simple love affair. Their loyalty was to the crown, yes, but above all, to Rhaegar, and possibly to something they also understood to be of cosmic importance. They were there to protect the last piece of the prophecy, the last hope for the realm from a world that did not understand the approaching threat. Rhaegar, his mind consumed by prophecy, believed his actions were justified by the gravity of the imminent threat. His father's madness, the realm's instability, all this was minor compared to the long night he felt approaching. He was willing to burn the known world to save humanity from an enemy no one else saw. It was a tragic conviction, born of a heart burdened by the weight of secret knowledge. The abduction of Lyanna Stark was the spark of a revolt that plunged Westeros into chaos. The fury of the Starks, a house of unwavering honor, and the Baratheons, a house of ardent passion, was unmatched. Lord Rickard Stark, the Patriarch of Winterfell, rode to King's Landing to demand Lyanna's release. His eldest son and heir, Brandon Stark, the Wild Wolf, had already arrived in the capital, furious, challenging Rhaegar to appear and fight. But Rhaegar was not there. He was secluded in his tower in Dorne, awaiting the birth of his prophesied son. King Aerys II's response to these demands was one of his growing madness. He saw Brandon's and Rickard's actions not as a plea for justice, but as an act of treason. a conspiracy against his throne. In a shocking act of cruelty, Aerys summoned Brandon's and Rickard's lords for trial, and then brutally and publicly murdered them. Lord Rickard was burned alive in his own armor, while Brandon, tied by a rope around his neck, strangled himself trying to reach a sword to save his father. The Starks' deaths, in an unprecedented act of disloyalty by the king, was a crime that could not be forgiven. News of his father's and brother's deaths reached Robert Baratheon and Ned Stark, Lyanna and Brandon's younger brother, Jon Arryn's ward in the Vale. Robert's fury was indomitable. His beloved Lyanna had supposedly been stolen, and now his friend and his father had been brutally murdered. To him, Rhaegar was the devil, responsible for all this tragedy. Ned Stark, a man of unwavering honor, was shocked and desolate. The war was now a personal matter of justice and vengeance. Aerys, in his paranoia, demanded the heads of Robert and Ned Stark from Jon Arryn, their Lord Protector in the Vale. Jon Arryn, a man of honor and duty, who had raised Robert and Ned as his own sons, refused. In an act of defiance, he raised his banners, marking the open beginning of Robert's rebellion. The war that would change Westeros forever had begun. The Stormlands, the Vale, and the North rose in arms, propelled by vengeance and the pursuit of justice. While Westeros plunged into a bloody war, Rhaegar Targaryen remained secluded in the Tower of Joy. His absence from the battlefields and his father's court is one of the most enigmatic aspects of his story. To many, it seemed an irresponsible abandonment of his duty as heir. But in Rhaegar's mind, his mission at the Tower of Joy was of supreme importance, far greater than any earthly war for a throne. He was there to protect the key to humanity's survival, the third dragonhead, who would be born from the union of ice and fire. He was convinced that once the son of prophecy was born, the truth would be revealed. The realm would understand that he had not acted out of illicit love or whim, but for a cosmic purpose. He believed that when the threat of the Long Night was finally understood, the rebellion would dissipate and everyone would unite under his son's banner. This unwavering faith in prophecy, however, blinded him to the political and social reality unfolding. The war would not wait for the birth of a savior. The war demanded blood and immediate action. While Rhaegar waited, the realm tore itself apart. Fierce battles erupted. Robert Baratheon, a warhammer in hand, proved to be a charismatic leader and a relentless warrior. He crushed Aerys' loyalist forces on several occasions, including the crucial Battle of Summerhall, where Robert won 3 victories in a single day. Robert Baratheon's legend grew with each victory, and the rebel cause gained strength and support. The Battle of the Bells, one of the rebellion's most memorable confrontations, saw Robert's forces cornered and almost destroyed. But with Ned Stark's arrival, the battle turned in the rebels' favor. This victory was a devastating blow to Targaryen forces and sealed the fate of many lords loyal to Aerys. The realm was consuming itself in a fratricidal fire. Famous houses fell, entire families were decimated, all while their crown prince was hundreds of miles away, focused on his prophetic obsession. Amidst the chaos of the rebellion, Princess Elia Martell, Rhaegar's wife, remained in King's Landing, isolated and vulnerable. She was innocent of Rhaegar's prophetic motivations and the complexity of his relationship with Lyanna Stark. For Elia, Rhaegar's act was a public humiliation, a betrayal that left her in a precarious position at the court of an increasingly mad king. Aerys, in his paranoia, began to distrust Elia and all the Dornish, seeing them as potential traitors. Elia and her children, Rhaenys and young Aegon, became hostages in the Red Keep, pawns in the hands of a mad king. Elias' grief and humiliation were profound. Her husband, her children's father, the heir she loved, was absent, seemingly focused on a love affair while the realm crumbled and her own family was in danger. She was a woman of frail health but of unwavering dignity, and she endured her situation with silent strength. Her only concern was the safety of her children, whom Aerys viewed with increasing distrust. Rhaegar, in his seclusion at the Tower of Joy, began to receive news of the rebellion's severity. Robert's victories, the fall of loyalists, the growing strength of the rebels, all this began to penetrate his bubble of prophetic conviction. Aerys had ordered the Kingsguard protecting Lyanna to return to fight, but Rhaegar prevented them, showing his priority. But the reality was undeniable. The realm was on the brink of collapse, and the Targaryen dynasty was about to crumble. He knew that if the Iron Throne fell, there would be no realm to save from the long night. The sacrifice he had made was transforming into a total cataclysm. It was then that Rhaegar made the decision to leave Lyanna and the Tower of Joy. It was not a decision taken lightly. He loved Lyanna and believed in the child she carried. But duty called him. He understood that, to fulfill the prophecy, the realm first needed to survive this war. He was not fighting for his father's throne, nor to defend his tarnished honor. He was fighting for the existence of Westeros, to preserve the chance that the prince that was promised could one day face the true darkness. His final battle was, not for glory, but for a desperate hope of salvation. Rhaegar Targaryen, the Prince of Prophecies, had finally returned to King's Landing. His decision was a belated recognition of the catastrophe his actions had precipitated. Robert's rebellion had swept across Westeros, and the only path for Rhaegar was to confront the leader of the revolt. In the next chapter, we will delve into the Battle of the Trident, the epic confrontation between Rhaegar and Robert, where the fate of a dynasty was decided. You will understand what was at stake for each man, and how the death of a prince sealed the destiny of an entire realm. Prepare for the whispers of the final combat, the final battle, and the Song of Destiny. Prince Rhaegar Targaryen had returned to King's Landing, but not to save his father, the Mad King. He returned to save the realm, to protect the future that the Song of Ice and Fire prophecy had revealed to him. His departure from the Tower of Joy, leaving Lyanna Stark and their unborn child, was the most difficult decision of his life, a personal sacrifice in the name of a cosmic duty. Now the path led him to the Trident River, where his destiny would collide with the untamed fury of Robert Baratheon. The march to the Trident was a grim prelude to the final battle. Rhaegar, the beloved heir, was now at the head of a Targaryen loyalist army, an army marked by the fatigue of war and the demoralization of Aerys madness. He had summoned as many forces as he could, counting on the loyalty of houses like the Martells of Dorne, under the command of Prince Lewin Martell of the Kingsguard, and the Tarleys of the Reach. However, many loyal lords had already been crushed, or had deserted. The Targaryen force, which once seemed invincible, was fragmented. Rhaegar dressed for battle in dark Targaryen armor, with a breastplate studded with rubies forming the emblem of the three-headed dragon. He wore no helmet to cover his face, showing his fearlessness. His blade was Dark Sister, Aegon the Conqueror's great Valyrian steel sword. The shadow of his great-grandfather, the dynasty's founder, hung over him. His expression was grim and resolute, a man who accepted his destiny with an almost supernatural serenity. He was not fighting for personal glory or his father's throne. He was fighting for the existence of Westeros. Every order he gave, every movement of his army, was for him a step in the fulfillment of the prophecy. On the other side of the Trident, the rebel army waited. Its ranks were composed of Northmen led by Ned Stark, the Knights of Jon Arryn's Vale, and the furious horde of the Stormlands, all united under the charismatic leadership and brute force of Robert Baratheon. They were exhausted, but their souls burned with the flame of vengeance and righteous cause. Robert, a warhammer in hand, was the personification of the god's fury, with his shaggy beard and wild eyes. He saw in Rhaegar the devil who had stolen his beloved Lyanna and destroyed his family. The Battle of the Trident was the clash of two eras, of two visions for Westeros. The battlefield, vast and irregular, stretched along the banks of the Trident River, whose shallow waters would allow for a direct confrontation. The colors of the banners mingled in a whirlwind, the black Targaryen dragon against the golden Baratheon stag, the gray Stark wolf, and the Arryn moon and falcon. The air was thick with the smell of sweat, metal, and fear. The armies crashed together with the roar of 1,000 thunderclaps. Cavalry charged infantry, blades met. The men's war cries mingled with the neighing of horses. Rhaegar Targaryen, mounted on his black steed, did not hide behind his troops. He rode into the heart of the battle, a general and a warrior. His presence on the battlefield was that of a leader, his skill with the blade formidable. He fought with an intensity that came from his soul, not from a simple desire for victory. Every swing of Dark Sister was a swing against the darkness he saw coming from the north, a desperate attempt to preserve the realm for the day of reckoning. He was joined by the last of the Kingsguard, who fought with unmatched courage, protecting their crown prince. Casualties were enormous on both sides. Men fell by the hundreds, their lives cut short by blades and axes. The Trident River, which once ran clear, began to turn red with the blood of the fallen. The battle dragged on, the outcome uncertain, until the two leaders, the two keys to Westeros' destiny, finally met. The duel between Rhaegar Targaryen and Robert Baratheon at the Trident was not just a military confrontation. It was the clash of two worldviews, two ardent passions that set the realm ablaze. Robert, a furious bull, driven by lost love and hatred, wielded his warhammer, seeking vengeance. Rhaegar, the melancholic prince, propelled by a prophecy and the burden of salvation, fought with a Valyrian blade that gleamed in the sun. For Rhaegar, that confrontation was a necessary obstacle. He saw in Robert an instrument of the world's fury, an obstacle that needed to be overcome so he could fulfill his greater destiny. His fight was not personal, though he knew of Robert's hatred. He fought for the prince that was promised, for the three-headed dragon, for the future against the ice. His mind, in the midst of chaos, was fixed on the prophecy. He could not afford to lose. Robert, in turn, saw in Rhaegar the personification of all evil that had befallen his life. The man who had stolen his Lyanna, who had caused the death of his friends and family. For Robert, it was a purely personal battle, a vengeance he had yearned for months, a chance to crush the man he saw as the culprit of everything. The blows were brutal. Robert's hammer descended with the force of lightning, seeking to crush his enemy. Rhaegar, with the grace of a dancer and the speed of a reflex, dodged, parried, counterattacked with his Valyrian blade. Every blow was an echo of destiny, every spark a glimpse of the hell that Westeros had become. The fight was intense, personal, and exhausting. And then came the final blow, the moment that would seal the fate of Rhaegar Targaryen and the dynasty. Amidst the chaos of battle, Robert Baratheon, with a final roar of fury, delivered a devastating strike with his hammer. The blow hit Rhaegar with all its force, shattering the ruby-studded armor on his chest. The rubies, the jewels that represented the emblem of the three-headed dragon, broke free from the armor and fell into the Trident River, gleaming like drops of blood in its waters. Rhaegar Targaryen fell. His body, crushed by Robert's hammer, sank into the red waters of the Trident. His last breath may have been a lament for the unfulfilled prophecy, or a thought for Lyanna and the child he would never know. The death of the Prince of Prophecies was the final point of his quest. He had fought for a future he would not see. Rhaegar's fall was the fatal blow to the Targaryen army's morale. With their crown prince dead, the resistance collapsed. The loyalist army dispersed in a desperate rout, terrified and leaderless. The victory belonged to Robert Baratheon, but it was a bitter victory. Robert himself was severely wounded, a blow that almost cost him his life. He was removed from the battlefield by his men, bleeding and exhausted. Ned Stark, arriving at the scene of the duel, found Rhaegar Targaryen's lifeless body on the banks of the Trident. A tragic figure, the prince who had once been the most beloved in the realm, now lay dead, his prophecies silenced. For Ned, who valued honor above all else, Rhaegar's death was a grim reminder of the price of war and the choices that could destroy a realm. The silence that fell over the battlefield was as deafening as the roar of the dragons at Harrenhal. Rhaegar's death at the Trident opened the gates of King's Landing. Without his heir and without an army to defend the capital, the Mad King, Aerys too, was at the mercy of the rebellion. News of the defeat at the Trident spread like wildfire, bringing panic and despair to the Red Keep. Aerys, in his final delusion of madness, planned to burn the entire city with wildfire, preferring to reign over ashes than to surrender. The final irony of Rhaegar's destiny was cruel. He had dedicated his life to a prophecy about the savior who would unite the realm against a threat of ice. But his actions, though motivated by that belief, precipitated a war which, in turn, led to the sacking and destruction of his own capital and the annihilation of his family. His death at the Trident was not for the Iron Throne, but for the chance of a future that was stolen by his father's madness and his enemy's fury. The battle of his life was won by another, and his legacy, though crucial, would be shrouded in mystery and tragedy. The Broken Dragon, the Prince of Prophecies, left a legacy shrouded in mystery. His life was a haunting melody, a song of ice and fire that would echo for generations. The seeds he planted at the Tower of Joy would bear fruit in the future, shaping Westeros' destiny in ways he could never have foreseen. The burden of prophecy did not die with him. It passed to the next generation, to Jon Snow and Daenerys Targaryen, the last echoes of his lineage and his song. Rhaegar Targaryen's story teaches us that destiny can be a heavy burden, and that the noblest actions, if misunderstood or executed without proper worldly wisdom, can have the most devastating consequences. But the prophecy remains, a shadow over Westeros, waiting for the hero or heroes who will finally sing it. Madness ran in the Targaryen blood, and in the next Whispers of Westeros, we will unveil the disturbed mind of Aerys II, the Mad King, and how his paranoia sealed the fate of his dynasty in an even crueler and more unexpected way. Prepare for the whispers of a king who burned his own realm. The broken legacy and the dusty prophecy. The Trident River had sealed the fate of Rhaegar Targaryen. His death, a final act of sacrifice in the name of a prophecy few understood, left the realm on the brink of collapse. With the Targaryen heir dead and the Loyalist army en route, the path to King's Landing lay open. What followed was the ultimate act of Robert's rebellion, an event of horror and betrayal that would mark the end of a dynasty and the beginning of a new bloody chapter in Westeros history. Aerys II, the Mad King, isolated and in his final delusion, in the Red Keep, received news from the Trident with escalating paranoia. He knew defeat was imminent. In his madness, he had planted wildfire throughout the city, beneath the septs, the houses, the alleys, with the intention of burning the entire capital if the rebels breached the walls, preferring to reign over ashes. He believed that, like a true dragon, he and his realm should burn together. When the Lannister forces, led by Lord Tywin Lannister, arrived at the gates of King's Landing, Aerys, in a final act of misjudgment, opened the gates, believing Tywin had come to aid him. It was a misguided trust that would seal his fate. Tywin Lannister, the Lion of Casterly Rock, a ruthless strategist, had not come to save Aerys, but to secure his own place in the new order. The Lannister betrayal was brutal. The city gates were opened to the soldiers, who surged upon the defenseless. Population in a savage sack. The streets of King's Landing became an inferno of chaos, looting, rape, and murder. The Lannister fury, suppressed for years under Aerys' disdain, was unleashed upon the defenseless city. Amidst this horror, the cruelest and most tragic consequence for Rhaegar's legacy occurred: the murder of his wife, Princess Elia Martell, and their children. Sir Gregor Clegane, the Mountain, a man of unmatched brutality, and Sir Amory Lorch stormed the Red Keep. Princess Rhaenys, Rhaegar's young daughter, was found hiding under her father's bed and brutally murdered. Young Prince Aegon, Rhaegar's Targaryen heir, was smashed against a wall by Gregor Clegane, his brains splattered. And Elia Martell, the delicate Princess of Dorne, was raped and murdered. The sight of their bodies, covered by Lannister cloaks, would be delivered to Robert Baratheon, a horrendous act that would demonstrate the cruelty of victory. Rhaegar's immediate family was annihilated, a legacy shattered before it even had a chance to blossom. Rhaegar's golden dragon, his direct lineage, was brutally and ignominiously extinguished. While King's Landing burned and the fate of the Targaryen dynasty was sealed with blood, Sir Jaime Lannister, a member of the Kingsguard and Tywin's son, faced his own dilemma. Amidst Aerys' madness, the Mad King ordered Jaime to kill his own father. and activate the wildfire to consume the city. Jaime, known for his beauty and his prowess in battle, was forced into an impossible choice: uphold his oath to protect the king or save hundreds of thousands of innocents in the capital. In a moment of decision, Jaime Lannister plunged his sword into King Aerys II's back, killing him and preventing the city's destruction by wildfire. He became the Kingslayer, the man who broke his most sacred oath and stained his name forever. His action, though it saved the city, would be misunderstood by many, who would see him only as a traitor. With Aerys' death, the Targaryen dynasty, which had reigned for almost 300 years, came to an end on the Iron Throne. The path was clear for Robert Baratheon's ascent. But the end of Robert's rebellion hid one last, crucial secret, a secret Rhaegar Targaryen had taken to his grave at the Trident. This secret was the key to the Song of Ice and Fire. Ned Stark, a man of unwavering honor, followed a clue, a whisper, and rode to Dorne with a small group of companions. His destination, the isolated Tower of Joy, the sanctuary Rhaegar had chosen for Lyanna Stark. At the Tower of Joy, Ned Stark and his companions encountered the last 3 knights of the Targaryen Kingsguard: Sir Arthur Dayne, the Sword of Eye, the Morning Westeros' most lethal swordsman, Sir Oswell Whent, and Lord Commander Gerald Hightower. They were there, guarding the tower, loyal to the end to their Prince Rhaegar and to an order no one else knew. The confrontation was brief and bloody. Only Ned Stark and Howland Reed survived the duel. Upon entering the tower, Ned found his sister, Lyanna Stark, dying in a bed of blood, not from battle wounds, but from childbirth. In her last moments, Lyanna made Ned promise something. "Promise me, Ned." What she asked, the secret she revealed, would forever change the perception of Robert's rebellion and the destiny of Westeros. Lyanna had given birth to a son, Rhaegar, Targaryen's son, not the son of an abduction or an illicit love, but the son of prophecy. Rhaegar had believed that the dragon had 3 heads, and that the 3rd head should come from the lineage of Ice, Stark, and Fire, Targaryen. The baby was the 3rd head, the true prince that was promised, the heir who would sing the Song of Ice and Fire. His Targaryen name was Aegon, the same name as Elias' son, and the same name as the Conqueror, but Ned would raise him as his own, bastard Jon Snow, to protect him from Robert Baratheon's fury and the danger he would be in if his true parentage were revealed. The promise Ned made to his sister, to protect Jon, would tie him to a secret that would shape his life and, eventually, cost him his own. The legacy of Rhaegar Targaryen is one of Westeros' most debated and tragic. For most of the realm, he is remembered as the boy who stole Lyanna Stark, the man who precipitated a war that toppled a dynasty and caused the death of countless innocents. He is Robert's villain, the symbol of the Targaryen madness that led to their own downfall. His reputation is stained, his name almost cursed. But, as this story reveals, Rhaegar's truth was far more complex. He was not a mere seducer or a vain prince. He was a man tormented by a prophecy, a cosmic burden that propelled him to acts that, to the outside world, seemed like madness and betrayal. He believed he was fighting for something much greater than a throne, humanity's salvation from the long night. His quest for the prince that was promised, the 3rd dragon head, led him on a path of personal sacrifice and tragedy. He died at the Trident, not to protect Aerys or his throne, but to preserve the chance that his son could one day face the true darkness. The irony is that his actions, though motivated by prophecy, precipitated the war and the destruction of his own family, making the fulfillment of the Song of Ice and Fire even more difficult. Aerys' madness, Robert's fury, and Lyanna's fate intertwined to create a brutal epilogue for his quest. The broken dragon, the Prince of Prophecies, left a legacy shrouded in mystery. His life was a haunting melody, a song of ice and fire that would echo for generations. The seeds he planted at the Tower of Joy would bear fruit in the future, shaping Westeros' destiny in ways he could never have foreseen. The burden of prophecy did not die with him. It passed to the next generation, to Jon Snow and Daenerys Targaryen, the last echoes of his lineage and his song. Rhaegar Targaryen's story teaches us that destiny can be a heavy burden, and that the noblest actions, if misunderstood or executed without proper worldly wisdom, can have the most devastating consequences. But the prophecy remains, a shadow over Westeros, waiting for the hero or heroes who will finally sing it. Madness ran in the Targaryen blood, and in the next Whispers of Westeros, we will unveil the disturbed mind of Aerys II, the Mad King, and how his paranoia sealed the fate of his dynasty in an even crueler and more unexpected way. Prepare for the whispers of a king who burned his own realm,